EAS Consulting Group, a member of the Certified Family of Companies, is a global leader in regulatory solutions for industries regulated by FDA. EAS offers the detailed knowledge and experience your company requires to ensure accurate and timely assistance. With our vast expertise of FDA policies and enforcement, EAS is the proven choice for assistance with FDA, product testing, and other regulatory solutions. Today's presenters are Dr. Teralyn Couch, Senior Director of Dietary Supplement and Tobacco Services at EAS. Dr. Couch is a PhD analytical organic chemist with over 25 years of diverse laboratory and regulatory experience in academic, field, contract, and manufacturing environments. She is a sought-after expert on issues pertaining to quality control, including the establishment of specifications and the development of well-organized, sophisticated laboratories. As a Senior Director for EAS Consulting Group, Dr. Couch has assisted numerous companies with the development, improvement, and implementation of strong quality systems that are scientifically sound, efficient, practical, and compliant with all FDA regulations. She also performs mock FDA inspections, gap analyses, and contractor facility audits.
So first we're going to talk about the tobacco services at EAS. That's the focus of our presentation today. So we're going to talk about the Tobacco Control Act and the deeming rule, and what does that require for PMTA submission and the aftermath of the submission that just occurred on September 9th. So EAS can assist you with all of the requirements of the Tobacco Control Act and the deeming rule. This includes product registration and ingredient listing, preparing for tobacco product manufacturing practices, which will be the focus of my discussion today. Auditing facilities to make sure that they're compliant with these requirements, including your own facility as well as contractors. Making sure that you have a quality system that's appropriate to meet these TPMPs. So that's the development of that system, corrective and preventative actions identified during audits, and anything else that's associated with compliance with the TCA. So we're going to start with those tobacco regulations and all the acronyms at the FDA that apply to tobacco products. So this includes the TCA, the FDCA, GMPs, TMPs, and PMTAs. So the Family Smoking Prevention and Control Act, better known as the Tobacco Control Act or TCA of 2009, gave the FDA the authority to regulate tobacco products to protect the public health and reduce tobacco use by minors. So this includes oversight over manufacturing, distribution, and marketing operations in the tobacco industry. This ensures that the tobacco products are in compliance with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which we'll discuss in just a moment. It also authorized the FDA to promulgate good manufacturing practice regulations, which are better known as GMPs. It defined a tobacco product as any product made or derived from tobacco that is intended for human consumption. This includes any component, part, or accessory of a tobacco product. Then in 2016, we got the deeming rule. What this did is extended the requirements for tobacco to deemed typed products. These are e-cigarettes, other electronic nicotine delivery systems known as ENDS products, cigars, pipe and hookah tobacco, nicotine gel, and dissolvable nicotine products. So what the Tobacco Control Act did is amend the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or the FDCA or FDNC Act. This act was passed by Congress back in 1938. This is a thing that's only enforced by the FDA, so FDA has to work with other legal bodies to do enforcement of the FDCA. But what the TCA did is add sections 900 to 919 of the FDCA. So this is a list of those. In section 903, it discussed what it called a misbranded tobacco product. So this is any product that would bear false, misleading, or incomplete labeling. It would be manufactured in an unregistered establishment because that is a requirement of the TCA. If there wasn't a prior approval of specific labeling statements, or if the relevant warning labels are not applied. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with this warning, the nicotine warning statement here. What we're going to focus our presentation on today is on adulterated tobacco products. So this is discussion section 902 of the FDCA. So a tobacco product will be adulterated if it is manufactured in filthy, putrid, or decomposed conditions, is prepared under insanitary conditions, you're not paying your quarterly fees as dictated in Section 919, if it doesn't conform to product standards that would be identified by the FDA in accordance to Section 907, if it doesn't get a pre-marketing order, which we're going to discuss at length today in Section 910, or if it violates 910 and 911, which require either a pre-market tobacco application, a PMTA, substantial equivalence, SE submission, or a modified risk tobacco application, or an MRTP for any new tobacco products. Also, if the methods used in or the facilities or controls used for its manufacture, packaging, or storage do not conform to the requirements of 906. And 906 talks about good manufacturing practices. Remember, these are the things that are going to be promulgated by the FDA. So again, this is the methods used in and the facilities used to control, manufacture, production, design, facilitation, packaging, and storage of the product. So GMPs are the regulations that are used to and enforced by the FDA to control and supervise companies that perform any of these operations. This is a systematic approach to ensure that the products are appropriately designed and there are controls in place to ensure that the product has the identity, strength, quality, and purity that it represents to possess. So these GMPs are dictated in what are called the CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations. So here's a list of a few of those for the FDA. We have them for foods, dietary supplements, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, etc. And we're waiting for the tobacco regulations. So the little c, I was always taught as little c, some people use it as a big C, means current. So that means that the regulations must also be current, always be current. So we have not yet seen good manufacturing practices from the FDA dictated specifically for tobacco. So it's been 11 years now, and we haven't seen those yet. It took 14 years for the FDA to promulgate these on the dietary supplement side. So the FDA is not going to update these on a regular basis. The expectation is that you remain current with modern technologies and up-to-date systems once the GMP is issued. So this requires what's referred to as a quality management system, or some people will call it a QMS or a quality system, to make sure that you have control of all of these things and make sure that you intend to eliminate or at least diminish instances of contamination, mix-ups, or errors. What this does is in turn protects the consumer from purchasing a product that is not effective or even dangerous. So a QMS system basically sets company policies, defines and improves processes, facilitates training, reduces waste, lowers costs, and engages personnel. And when put together correctly, these are used as your training tool. The FDA's perspective is that this addresses the FDA's concern of protecting the public health, which is their mandate. So any sort of quality system has to be managed from the top and has to be dispersed throughout the entire company. It's not sufficient to have a quality group that is less than 10% of the company responsible for quality across the entire company. Quality is everyone's responsibility. So the FDA Center for Tobacco Products CTP Director Mitch Zeller has repeatedly stated that the FDA is actively working on giving us these GMPs, which will be called the Tobacco Product Manufacturing Practices for tobacco. So they will not be called GMPs, they will be called TPMPs. This is done, again, to ensure that the product is not adulterated, and this will extend to all people that are doing PMTA submissions. Of course, all of you are well aware, I'm sure, that we just exceeded the deadline of September 9th for all new products that would be marketed as tobacco products. So a new tobacco product is defined as one that was not on the market as of February 15th, 2007. So any products that were on the market prior to that date are considered grandfathered. All new tobacco products are required to obtain some sort of pre-marketing authorization. A marketing application must have been submitted again by September 9th for deemed tobacco products that were brought underneath the deeming rule on August 6, 2016. A pre-market application for those products that weren't already on the market must still be approved even if they weren't on the market before August 8th, but they will have to get that market order before they can be marketed. So this brings us to a PMTA. There are 3 different ways to legally market a new tobacco product. So it's either a PMTA, an SE, or an exemption from an SE. To date, the FDA has stated that there are no valid grandfathered ENDS products, that's our electronic nicotine delivery system products, that have identified to have been on the market before, so all of these products are new. So that means they're going to all have to go through this PMTA process. So generally, the PMTA requirements require a health report about the tobacco product, full statements and data to support the components, ingredients, additive properties, and any principal operations of the tobacco product, and a full description of all the methods used in and the facilities and controls used for the manufacturing processing and packaging, which are known as those GMPs, and any identifying reference to a tobacco product standard with that comes applicable. The FDA issued a final guidance for PMTA submissions back in June of 2019. This is the guidance for industry pre-market tobacco product applications for ENDS products. And recently, the CTP has been putting out numerous statements and provides a litany of information on its website for FDA tobacco application tips. So once we've done all of this testing, then the next step will be to do the submission of the PMTA. Right, so we will do that. And again, if all of that goes well and we have a substantive review that is going to take place, then the FDA will do a pre-approval inspection. So this is a critical step in your PMTA approvals process. So this is a very serious interaction with the FDA, and you can help ensure that that inspection goes well by having a plan. Right? So that means that there should be an SOP on how to handle an FDA inspection, assigning a specific quality unit personnel, so quality unit being both quality assurance and quality control, to manage that investigation, and having a manager responsible for that that's doing the primary communication with the FDA investigator or investigators more likely. So it's very important to know what to expect and to know what your role and your rights are as an auditee of the FDA. So to prepare for this, you want to make sure that you assign a specific location to entertain the FDA. So this would be a conference room of adequate size because you're going to be reviewing a lot of documents and records like Andrew was just talking about, as well as for the testing, as well as for the rest of the facility where this inspection is going to be taking place. And this will likely be at the manufacturing facility. There are many facilities that could be audited as part of the process, but first and foremost, the FDA wants to understand that the product is going to be consistently manufactured to those specifications and quality standards. So it needs to evaluate that manufacturing facility. So that will be step 1 in the investigatory process and the inspection process for the FDA. So there are a specific list of documents that the FDA always requests to see during an inspection. So they want to see an organizational chart to know who are the key personnels, and make sure that one of the fundamentals of the GMP system is that there's a checks and balances type system, and that is that quality unit or that quality assurance, quality control type of group. So they want to make sure that that group reports up through a different channel to make sure that we do indeed have those checks and balances. When they're evaluating a facility, it's good to know where you're at. So having a facility overview or floor plan of the manufacturing operation is very helpful, and a product list. Remember, I talked briefly earlier that there is registration requirements for products, so the FDA knows what products you have registered, and they would expect that list to be consistent. A process flow diagram for the manufacturings, an equipment list that quickly tells the FDA what kind of operations are taking place at a facility, and the SOB TOC, or table of contents, for all of the documents that you have. And you should practice. Practice always makes, quote, perfect, right? So performing mock FDA inspections, this is something that EAS regularly does, is a great thing to do once you have your quality management systems in place, so you can be prepared for this. So you can really set the tone of your inspection by having an appropriate opening meeting. So this would be introducing all the key players that would be involved at the facility, and providing the FDA with a 15 to 20 minute presentation on what you do at the facility. This has become an expectation in all FDA inspections, whether it's a pre-approval or a GMP type of inspection. So this really gives some of the information that the FDA expects to see right up front, prepared, and that also tells them that you know what to expect in the next coming days. Also, you should set up what is often referred to as, quote, the war room. So this is the place where all the documents are going to be prepared and given to the person that is managing the inspection ahead of time. The FDA is going to require many documents, hundreds of documents, if not more than that, to make sure that they're evaluating the facility as well as what's in your PMTA submission and asking any questions, and you can provide documents that support all of that. So this room is a crazy room that is run around gathering all of this information, keeping track of what goes into the FDA, what the questions are, making sure that the documents that are being provided are addressing those questions. So this war room is arguably just as important, if not more important, than what's actually happening with the FDA. So these are two things that must work in cahoots together very smoothly. Even though we haven't seen TPMPs yet, the Tobacco Product Manufacturing Practices, we have numerous cGMPs that I dictated before in the CFRs. And they generally all have the same sort of essential parts. So that is sections on personnel, physical plant, equipment, specifications and testing, the quality unit, components, packaging and labels, a master manufacturing record, batch production record, laboratory operations, as Andrew just talked about, manufacturing operations, packaging and labeling operations, holding and distribution operations, returns, complaints, and how to keep records of all of this, right? So we're going to very quickly go through some of the basic principles of these things. We will know certainly more details once we do have the TPMPs, but we have other GMPs that we can base this discussion on. So the most recent GMPs that are probably most applicable to the tobacco industry are 21 CFR 111, which are the dietary supplement GMPs. But of course, these products are being submitted to the FDA, so that is much more pharma-like. The GMPs for 111 and 210, 211, which are the pharmaceutical GMPs, are remarkably similar with some exceptions. Most notably being test method validations that Andrew spoke to us about. So 210 and 211 are also going to be applicable. And when we're talking about ENDS products in particular, it's really a combination product, right? So we have the tobacco, we have a nicotine delivery system, and we have a medical device. So we also will bring in 21 CFR 820 for medical devices. So all these things come together, but generally they have a lot of the same requirements. Most importantly, all of them require records and record keeping. So you must have procedures and supporting documentation for everything that you do. Everything that you do in a GMP environment must be written down. If it's not documented, it wasn't done and it didn't happen. So we like to jokingly say GMPs actually stand for get more paper, get more people. I live in the mountains of Colorado, so my favorite is giant mountains of paper. So in accordance to various GMPs, you must keep these records as originals. So as Andrew was talking about with 21 CFR Part 11, this is electronic records and electronic signatures. If you have any systems that are kept in an electronic system, they must comply with this this particular code. They can be manual records too, and so anything that you would do in a manual way also has to be done electronically. And then the FDA has access to these when they perform these inspections. There are a couple of exceptions to these, most notably anything pertaining to personnel that would be related to health, except for training records or anything financial. Other than that, the FDA usually has access to all of these things, particularly when it pertains to a pre-approval inspection. So we have another acronym that comes into play here called GDPs, or Good Documentation Practices. This means that you have to document every activity at the time of performance. You don't do the activity and then write it down later. You don't write it down ahead of time and then perform the activity. This is happening contemporaneously. So these are things that have to be done together. If you're doing manual documentation, it must be legible and it must be permanent. So this would also certainly apply to an electronic system as well, that it's permanent. So this is why we do the validation, to make sure that we can recover those records and we have that audit trail. It also must indicate who performed the operations and when. So this would be done typically by a signature and date, or initials and date if we have a correlation between the initials and the signature of that particular person. Also having metadata or units associated with a number is very important. So if I just say to you 119, there's no frame of reference for what that means. If I say 119 grams, now that means something. If I say 119 degrees Celsius, that means something else, right? So it's very important to have what's referred to as that metadata along with any numerical values. We are all human, so we do make mistakes. So when you make errors, there's a systematic way in which you do that. So you don't want to obscure the original result. So you need to just do a single line through that if this is done manually, and then indicate the correct number, say why it was changed, who changed it, and when. So again, this would also have to be happening in electronic systems. So we can't delete the original entry. The original entry still exists, but it's been changed, and we say why it's been changed, by who, and when. It's very important, your personnel. So this sounds lame, but hire good people and develop them. You can't overstate that enough, right? So people are your most important resource. So they are the ones enforcing and following these cGMP requirements, and they usually account for the errors. And it's not because people are not trying to comply with these systems. It's usually because the system isn't well enough designed, or that the employees aren't appropriately trained on those systems. So we've got to have those. So personnel training is always something that the FDA will look at during an inspection, and every person that's engaged in a cGMP operations, which will probably be everyone in a manufacturing facility, must have a combination of three things: education, training, and experience to perform their assigned job function. That means they have to know what their assigned job function is, and we have to have documentation of what that all is. There also have to be specific identified quality people, or that quality unit group, for that checks and balances system, which we talked about as one of the essential systems. It is also noted that in 21 CFR Part 111 for dietary supplements, it specifically calls out a sanitation supervisor. So this dictates how concerned the FDA is about general sanitation. Remember, that is one of the reasons that a product can be considered adulterated if it's prepared in, if it's putrid or contains any sort of contaminants. So sanitation is a critical factor also in any sort of GMP system. So quality unit has a lot of responsibilities. So they create, monitor, and implement that quality system. They assess the suitability of everything that goes into your product, making sure that all the manufacturing and packaging and labeling operations are appropriate. They will review all of your GMP activities, not necessarily performing those, but reviewing all of those, and then be doing the regular tracking and monitoring of those processes and auditing them. They're also responsible for when something goes wrong, to make sure that that is investigated appropriately, and we will talk about all of that. So again, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So in regards to training, you must have a training record that would have that job description and dictate all of the types of trainings that happen, the date of the training, who was the trainer, and who were the people that were trained, and that will be in that training record. That training record will also have a history of what that person's training was prior to coming to your facility. So that can be the form of a resume, CV, job application, a biography, something of that nature, all on the job training. So this can be not only just read and understand of various procedures, but also proficiency. So proficiency testing is critical when you're talking about laboratory operations. Attending various courses, and that includes GMP training. One of the dirtiest things that's usually in your facility is in fact people. So people must be using hygienic practices to make sure that we're not a source of contamination to the material or product. So everyone must wash their hands at appropriate times, and we are all well aware of this in the world of COVID-19. This also includes gowning appropriately. So depending on what type of operations take place, this could be wearing a lab coat, eye protection, gloves, hairnet, beard covers, shoe covers, making sure you remove any unsecured jewelry so that can't fall into a product or material. And then the physical plant and grounds itself can't be a source of contamination to the product. So this is both internal and external. So by the time the FDA is at your doorstep, they probably already walked the perimeter of your facility because it includes the external facility as well. In addition to that, the facility itself has to be of appropriate design structure to maintain clean and sanitary conditions when you do all of these things. So this is a picture of a colleague of mine while he was an FDA investigator, and you can see all the weeds here. So this is pest harborage, and then there's a door right there, right? So he's obviously turned around so you can't see him. They don't take pictures of themselves during an inspection. So all equipment has to be properly stored. That weeds and grass has to be cut that are in the immediate vicinity. Litter and waste has to be removed. If you've got roads, yards, or parking lots around your facility, which you certainly will, those would have to be appropriately maintained. If you have standing water, that's always a pest harborage location, so you have to make sure that's appropriate, and you have appropriate disposal of waste. The plant also has to be suitable in size, construction, and design to facilitate that and maintain that cleaning and sanitation, as I mentioned. So you have to be able to see all parts of that facility. So you can't walk in and everything be flush against the walls and everything so tight that you can't even walk around the facility. You can't inspect it and verify that everything is clean if you can't even get to it. Right, so if you're using blowers, vents, or grids, those must be appropriately covered and not have grease and dirt buildup around them. Also, temperature, humidity, and light can certainly affect materials and products. So you have to make sure everything is stored and held at appropriate conditions. You also have to make sure that things on the surface are cleaned, so removing dirt, litter, mopping, sweeping, and once you do that with mops and stuff, those mops are clean themselves, right? Things have to be sanitary to make sure that you don't have any micro-contamination or any cross-contamination of products and impact the safety of the consumer. The facility has to be in an adequate state of repair, so no holes, cracks in walls, floors, ceiling, doors, and windows. That's a good, easy FDA get just to look through the facility and see that you have holes in the doors and along the windows and that sort of thing. So it doesn't just include floors though, so all tables, cleaning under tables, cleaning on top of equipment, all of that sort of stuff is required. Every piece, every material and or product that is in a facility must be identified at all times by a number of different things. One of those is status control. So when any sort of material comes into the facility, it is brought in a status of quarantine. Right? Until such time as we determine as it meets whatever the specification requirements are, then quality can make a decision to reject or accept that material as it is. So if it moves to accepted, then that would be identified and the material would be identified as such. If it is rejected, we need to identify that and remove it from the mainstream of things so that it can't accidentally be used. And everything should be identified at all times by these three criteria. A lot of times you'll see a lot of variation of this, so at least these three, but you'll also have on hold and a variety of other things. But you at least have to identify everything at all times. This can be done with an electronic system if that electronic system has been validated to be Part 11 compliant and everyone has access to verify that the equipment, all the materials and products are in a particular status. Pest control is very important. Certainly we have beetles to worry about in tobacco, but we also have to worry about other types of rodents and animals that could be pests that could contaminate our product. So there are upwards of 35 different diseases that are passed to humans through different animals, and we have all been well schooled in this in the past 6 months or so. So we are well aware of the requirements of pest control. So you have to have an appropriate pest control program. So no animals or pests are allowed in the plant where that could pose a contamination risk. And usually this is handled by an appropriate pest control company who are the professionals in how to deal with this. Equipment and utensils have to be appropriate design, construction, and workmanship to enable them to be suitable for their intended use and be adequately cleaned and properly maintained. So this starts with the design of the equipment to make sure that they are of the appropriate design to be used in the conditions in which they are used. So they have to be corrosion resistant, made of non-toxic materials, and withstand high temperatures and or acid cleaning, whatever the conditions might be for that particular type of equipment. And they always have to be calibrated. So instruments and controls have to be calibrated before their first use and at the frequency specified by the manufacturer or more, depending on how the equipment is being handled, and must also be maintained in a state of repair and replaced as necessary. They should always be identified by these criteria. So if it's within calibration, you typically will see a green type calibration sticker. If it's out of calibration and can't be used, it should be identified as such. There can also be a third example where something doesn't have to be qualified if you're not using a particular control device. Equipment has to be maintained. Once you go through all the trouble of the qualification, the calibration, you have to maintain all of that. So in regards to the equipment qualification, Andrew already gave us the description of how to do that with the DQ, IQ, OQ, PQ process. So that is what you would do first, then the calibration, then the maintenance. In terms of master manufacturing record, you must have an MMR as dictated in the GMPs that's followed every time you make a product, right? So we will have a very prescriptive description of how we're going to make this product. This will be part of your PMTA submission. So how are you going to put this product together? So this is basically your recipe or your bill of materials combined with all the steps that are necessary from getting the raw materials to getting to your finished product. This is a very detailed, lengthy document that will walk through every detail of how to put together this product. So the purpose is to provide instructions for every point, step, or stage of the manufacturing and packaging process, and make sure that you're consistently manufacturing that product. There will also be specific tests that are done for specifications throughout the process and a variety of controls and procedures that are overseeing all of these processes, and these will be referenced. So the MMR, or the Master Manufacturing Record, has specific content requirements. If you go through 21 CFR 111 as a guidance, it's basically a laundry list of all the things that have to be in your Master Manufacturing Record. So I'm not going to read all of these, but all of these would be required in your MMR. And then once you execute that MMR, every time you make a lot, it magically becomes what's referred to as the batch production record, or BPR. So this, again, is done every time you make a lot of the product. So this will indicate the date, that every raw material was used, the date of every step, who did it, and when. So again, following those GDP requirements, and again, all of that will be done at the time of performance. So much like the MMR, there's a laundry list of what you would expect to see in a batch production record, but if you put together your MMR appropriately, you'll just be following that. And this BPR should be an exact copy of what you're doing in your master manufacturing record, but now you will indicate specific lots and specific materials, which equipment was used, when and by whom, and all of the weights and units associated thereof. This BPR then has to be reviewed and approved by your quality unit. Again, this is one of your essential systems of your checks and balances for GMPs. Specifications and testing are critical throughout the entire process, but obviously prior for the PMTA submission and after, which Andrew will speak to us about in a moment. There are a number of specifications that are built into the manufacturing process and where the product materials are being received. So this includes specifications for raw materials. So this will come to include the tobacco, the e-liquids, and all non-tobacco material, and all the parts of an ends product, which can be numerous, packaging components, in-process material specifications, so all throughout the manufacturing process, and the finished tobacco product. So this can include physical, chemical, or microbiological testing, and usually all of the above. So the specifications have to hit identity, address and unequivocally identify the material from anything else, and oftentimes this takes more than one test to do so. So that's referred to as orthogonal testing by the United States Pharmacopoeia. Purity testing is also very important for chemical purity, foreign matter, and microbiological purity as determined by the World Health Organization as appropriate. Strength, so of course we're talking about the nicotine content and potentially flavor strength for different types of e-liquid products, and how the product is composed. So this can be a variety of different factors depending on the nature of the product, and looking for contaminants, so the HPHCs that Andrew spoke to us about, as well as any other types of contaminants that might be appropriate for the particular material, as I mentioned, beetles in the actual tobacco itself. Laboratory operations are essential. It's all the decisions on whether to release a material or whether to release a product are based on testing. So if the testing is not done correctly, then your product is considered adulterated. So method validation and doing stability, whether it's in-house or externally at LabStat, is critical to those operations. In the laboratory, you must have these written processes. You must have appropriate laboratory facilities and control processes. You must have at least scientifically valid, if not validated, test methods that we discussed. And all of this must be documented at the time of performance. When something doesn't go as planned, you also have to have a system for that. So typically this is referred to as a non-conforming product investigation. In the dietary supplement world, it's referred to as a material review. Some people will call it an NCM, non-conforming material investigation. Whatever you call it, this is an investigation on the impact of any sort of quality incident that might occur. These of course happen all of the time. So if you think about an NCP type of system, there are a bunch of criteria in which that could happen. So if you don't meet a specification, you have an out of specification situation. If you deviate from that master manufacturing record, that is also a need to do an investigation. Or if there's any sort of unanticipated occurrence, or I call those the oopsies during the manufacturing process, you would have to have some sort of quality investigation. All the efforts that we go through to qualify, calibrate, and maintain our equipment, if we have a problem with that equipment, we have to investigate that and see what does that mean to any materials or products that were used with that equipment. If you have a return of a product, you have to investigate that. Certainly, if there's any complaints that are received from the consumer, or if this is a contractual relationship, where does that leave you? and doing an investigation into all of that. So these are some of the sources of those: the OOS, the deviation, the quality incident. So all of these will have to be evaluated, determine what corrective and preventative actions might be needed, or if something needs to be changed in your system, and that would be done through a formal change control type of a system. The FDA will always ask to look at product complaints. So this is likely where some of these issues are going to be to demonstrate themselves. So this needs to be a well-documented system that's coordinated through any contracting partners, and any follow-up actions would have to be reviewed and approved by the quality unit and go through that same change control or corrective and preventative action system. So these are all some of the systems that are required for that pre-approval inspection. After that pre-approval inspection, there may be more testing requirements that are dictated in an FDA deficiency letter or any sort of follow-up communications from the agencies. I've gone through the big ticket items for a quality management system very quickly, and making sure that we're managing all of this from a high level at the facility. We've got that quality unit identified. We've got that quality management system put together. So we have that traceability from our material all the way through the product and back and forth, and have established these specifications to do the testing that is required in the 3 phases. So thank you very much for your attention. We appreciate that, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you may have at this point.
The first question is, how soon after the PMTA acceptance and filing can a manufacturer expect an FDA audit?
I can take that. I think that's a great question, the $1 million question. So at the October 2019 PMTA meeting that the FDA held, what they had requested is that along with your submission, you put 4 months of manufacturing schedule in there, because they intended, if you got to the substantial review, that within that 4-month time period, they would be coming to your facility to do that pre-approval inspection. The challenges, of course, with COVID-19, that the FDA for a long period was not able to do any inspections. They are now officially doing inspections within the United States, but of course, given travel restrictions and that sort of thing, that's very limited at this point in time. In addition, right now the FDA, got inundated with all of these submissions, so I don't know if that 4-month window will still hold. But that was their recommendation, so that's where I would sort of start, and then bearing in mind all these other things that are going on in this crazy year of 2020.
Thank you. The next question, will post-PMTA submission audits be blind, or will brands and manufacturers receive notice?
I can take that one too. For pre-approval inspection, those will be always coordinated with the FDA. So the FDA wants to make sure that the right people are there for the facility, so they can get all those questions answered. So that may be at the manufacturer, as well as having the brand owner there present if it's a contractual situation, which it typically is in the tobacco industry. So they will coordinate that with you during a pre-approval inspection. That is different for a general GMP inspection when we get to those in the future for these PMTA products. But for pre-approvals, those are always announced.
And I understand FDA doesn't want paper. How are they dealing with the transfer of records?
They like electronic submissions, and there is a specific system that they like to see, and all of that information is available on the FDA's website.
For each flavor concentrate that we receive, do we need orthogonal testing?
It depends upon your narrative for the appropriate protection of public health, so that would be relevant to determine what types of testing is necessary. And if you're talking about different flavors, having appropriate bridging studies between those, that's certainly something that, LabStat and EAS can help you frame. But a lot of that is going to come from yourself, how you're, what the plan is with the submission and what the intent of the product is to meet that APPH standard.
Have there been any pre-approval inspections conducted in the tobacco space?
There have. So I was actually in Asia in the beginning of the year, involved in the first ENDS PMTA inspection. So the FDA has started doing those. Those got kind of abruptly halted with the pandemic, but obviously we would expect those to continue. And of course we do have 2 other PMTAs that have been approved for the Swedish match and for the ICOS product. So certainly there have been some pre-approval inspections.
If you have any additional questions, you'll see contact information on the slide in front of you. And we thank you very much for your interest in both LabStat and EAS and hope to be of service to you in the future.